The scent of roasting meat and spiced wine filled the great hall, mingling with the musk of too many bodies pressed together in celebration. I kept my head down, moving between the long wooden tables with practiced invisibility. My pale blonde hair, hastily pulled back, had begun to escape its bindings, and I tucked the loose strands behind my ears as I balanced another heavy tray of goblets. "More wine for the western table," barked Matron Helena, her voice cutting through the cacophony of laughter and conversation. Her eyes never quite met mine. They never did. No one's did, not since the claiming ceremony 3 moons ago, when I'd stood before the pack, waiting for my wolf to emerge, and nothing happened. An omega who couldn't shift, a broken thing. I nodded silently and made my way toward the kitchen, my simple gray serving dress brushing against the stone floor. The feast to welcome the neighboring packs had transformed our usually austere hall into a spectacle of wealth and power. Tapestries depicting great hunts and ancient battles had been hung to cover the bare walls, and hundreds of candles cast a golden glow over faces flushed with wine and excitement. "Watch yourself, broken one," hissed Darius, one of the beta males, as he deliberately stepped into my path. I clutched the tray tighter, avoiding his eyes. "Strange that they let you serve tonight. Wouldn't want to offend our royal guest with your deficiency." The words stung, though I'd heard worse. My grandmother's voice echoed in my memory. "Even the weakest sapling can grow strong roots in the darkest soil. Eleanor, remember who you are beneath what they see." The small wooden pendant she'd carved for me, a tiny wolf with its head raised to the moon, hung hidden beneath my dress, pressing against my skin like a secret promise. I slipped past Darius without responding and pushed through the swinging doors into the kitchen's chaotic warmth. Sweat beaded on my forehead as I set down the empty tray and reached for the wine pitchers. "They're saying he's arrived," whispered Lily, another serving girl, as she appeared beside me. Unlike me, she was a proper beta, with a place in the pack. She was also the closest thing I had to a friend. The Alpha King of the Northern Territories. "They say his pack is the oldest and strongest in the land. The Alpha King is here as a courtesy only," said Cook, her hands never pausing as she arranged sliced fruits on a platter. "Our Alpha believes an alliance might be beneficial, but I've heard whispers that the king rarely forms bonds with other packs, especially not ones with our history." I knew what she meant. Our pack had barely survived the Great War 50 years ago, when rogue hunters had decimated our numbers. We'd been rebuilding slowly, cautiously, under Alpha Marcus's leadership. But we remained vulnerable, which was why those like me, the defective ones, were such a disappointment. "Eleanor," Matron Helena's sharp voice made me jump. "Take this platter to the high table, and for the love of the moon, try not to drop it or draw attention to yourself." The high table, where Alpha Marcus sat with his inner circle and honored guests. Where he would be sitting, the Alpha King whose mere presence had sent our entire pack into a frenzy of preparation for weeks. I took the heavy silver platter, laden with the finest cuts of venison, and made my way back into the hall. The noise seemed to have intensified, conversations overlapping and laughter booming across the vaulted ceiling. I kept my eyes on the stones beneath my feet, counting steps to calm my racing heart. 23, 24, 25. I was at the dais where the high table stood. I could feel the weight of importance, the shift in the air that signaled power. I risked a glance upward, and time stopped. Seated at the center of the table was a man unlike any I'd ever seen. Even sitting, his height was evident, his broad shoulders draped in a cloak of deep midnight blue lined with silver fur. His face seemed carved from granite, strong jaw, high cheekbones, and eyes the color of a winter sky. But it wasn't his striking appearance that made my breath catch. It was the power that emanated from him, a tangible force that seemed to bend the very air around him. The Alpha King. His gaze swept the room with cool assessment, lingering briefly on each face as though memorizing it, judging it. I lowered my eyes quickly and stepped forward to place the platter on the table. My hands trembled slightly, and I prayed to the moon goddess that I wouldn't embarrass myself. "Your Majesty, I trust the journey was comfortable," Alpha Marcus was saying, his voice carrying that forced, jovial tone he used when trying to impress. Our territories have much to offer each other in these uncertain times. I set down the platter and began to retreat, backing away as I'd been taught. 3 steps back, then turn, disappear. Who is she? The deep voice cut through the noise like a blade through silk. Conversations around the high table faltered and died. I froze, certain I had misheard, or that he was referring to someone else. Your Majesty? Alpha Marcus sounded confused. That girl. The one with the pale hair who just served us. Who is she? My heart hammered against my ribs. I kept my eyes fixed on the floor, feeling the weight of dozens of gazes suddenly upon me. Ah, Marcus said, and I could hear the dismissive wave in his voice. She is no one of importance, just a serving girl, a defective Omega who failed to shift. The silence that followed was heavier than any I'd ever experienced. I could feel my cheeks burning with shame, exposed before everyone as the pack's failure. Bring her to me. 4 simple words that changed everything. I still couldn't look up, couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Your Majesty, Marcus stammered. We have many worthy members of our pack who would be honored to. I did not ask for your worthy members, the Alpha King interrupted, his voice like ice. I asked for her. Heavy footsteps approached, and then Beta Darius was at my side, his fingers digging painfully into my upper arm. You heard the king, he hissed, dragging me forward. I stumbled, nearly falling as he pushed me before the high table. I could feel the collective shock of the pack around me, their confusion and resentment palpable in the suddenly still air. Finally, I forced myself to look up. The Alpha King was watching me with an unreadable expression, those winter blue eyes seeming to see straight through me. Up close, I could see the faint silver scars that marked his face, battle scars worn like honors rather than flaws. His dark hair was pulled back, revealing a strong forehead and those piercing eyes that never wavered. Your name, he said, not a question, but a command. Eleanor, Your Majesty, I whispered, my voice barely audible even to my own ears. Eleanor. He said my name slowly, as though tasting it. You will sit. Confusion rippled through me. Sit, Your Majesty? His mouth quirked slightly at one corner, not quite a smile. Yes, here. He gestured to the empty chair beside him, a chair clearly meant for someone of importance, not a failed Omega relegated to serving duties. The collective gasp from the pack was audible. I saw Alpha Marcus's face contort with shock and something like fear. Your Majesty, surely one of our... Are you questioning my decision, Alpha Marcus? The king's voice remained calm, but something dangerous lurked beneath the surface. Marcus paled. Of course not, Your Majesty. Good. The king turned those winter eyes back to me. Sit, Eleanor. My legs moved of their own accord, carrying me around the table to the ornate chair he'd indicated. As I sank into it, acutely aware of my simple gray dress and loose hair among the finery of the high table, I could feel the stunned stares of everyone in the hall. The Alpha King turned to me, leaning slightly closer, and I caught his scent. Pine and snow and something wild that made my wolf, dormant though she was, stir within me for the first time. Do you know who I am, Eleanor? He asked, his voice low enough that only I could hear. I swallowed hard. You're the Alpha King of the Northern Territories, Your Majesty. Something flickered in his eyes, amusement perhaps. I am King Alaric Blackthorn, and you, little wolf, are not what they believe you to be. Before I could ask what he meant, he turned away, raising his goblet to the hall. To new alliances, he declared, his voice ringing with authority. The pack raised their glasses in response, a sea of confused and wary faces. I felt Matron Helena's shocked glare, saw Beta Darius's barely concealed sneer. Alpha Marcus looked as though he'd swallowed something bitter, his forced smile not reaching his eyes. As the feast resumed around us, with nervous conversation slowly building back to its previous volume, I sat rigid in my chair, hyper-aware of the powerful presence beside me. Why had he singled me out? What did he see that no one else did? That even I couldn't see in myself. The wooden wolf pendant felt suddenly warm against my skin, My grandmother's words echoing in my mind. Remember who you are beneath what they see. King Alaric turned to me again, his voice a rumble that sent a shiver down my spine. Tell me, Eleanor, have you ever wondered why you cannot shift? And with that simple question, I knew my life would never be the same again. I stared at King Alaric, unable to comprehend how he could ask such an intimate question so directly. My inability to shift was my deepest shame, the core of my rejection, and he had brought it up as casually as one might comment on the weather. My voice faltered. Around us, conversations continued, though I could feel curious glances sliding our way. It's not something I discuss, Your Majesty. No? He took a slice of venison from the platter I had brought, cutting it with precise movements. Yet it defines how they treat you, how you treat yourself. The truth of his words stung. I reached for the goblet before me. Crystal, not the wooden cups I usually used, and took a sip of wine to hide my discomfort. I've seen your kind before, he continued, his voice low enough that only I could hear. Wolves whose power lies dormant, waiting for the right moment. Hope flared briefly in my chest before I smothered it. I'd spent too many nights praying to the moon goddess, begging for my wolf to emerge. Too many mornings waking to disappointment. With respect, Your Majesty, our healers have confirmed that my wolf is broken. The word tasted bitter on my tongue. King Alaric's eyes narrowed slightly. And how exactly did they confirm this? The memory surfaced unbidden, standing in the sacred circle during the claiming ceremony, surrounded by the expectant faces of my pack as the full moon rose, the ritual herbs burning, their smoke filling my lungs, the chanting, the waiting. And then, nothing. No transformation, no connection to the wolf spirit that should have been my birthright. I failed to shift during my claiming ceremony, I said quietly, and every full moon since. He took a sip of his wine, studying me over the rim of his goblet. And what happens when you try to call your wolf outside of the ceremony? I blinked, confused by the question. I don't understand. The ceremony is when... Forget the ceremony, he interrupted. When you are alone, in the forest perhaps, and you call to your wolf, what happens? I stopped, realizing I had never actually tried. The claiming ceremony was our pack's ancient tradition. Those who failed were immediately classified, their status determined. It had never occurred to me that there might be another way. I've never tried, I admitted. Something that might have been satisfaction flickered in his eyes. Interesting. Before I could ask what he meant, Alpha Marcus leaned forward, clearly uncomfortable with our private conversation. Your Majesty, I hope you'll honor us by joining the hunt tomorrow. Our forests are rich with game this season. King Alaric turned to him with that same impassive expression. I look forward to it. His voice was polite but distant, clearly dismissing further conversation. Marcus's gaze flicked to me, a flash of confusion and annoyance crossing his features, before he turned to speak with someone else at the table. The feast continued around us, but I barely tasted the fine food placed before me. My mind raced with the implications of King Alaric's questions. What did he see in me that others didn't? What did he mean by wolves whose power lies dormant? The pendant you wear, he said suddenly, startling me from my thoughts. May I see it? My hand automatically went to my neck, though the pendant itself was hidden beneath my dress. How did you... I can sense it, he said simply. Wood from an ancient tree, carved with intention. May I? Hesitantly, I pulled the leather cord from beneath my collar, revealing the small wooden wolf. In the candlelight, the intricate carving seemed almost alive, its tiny eyes catching the light. King Alaric didn't touch it, but leaned closer to examine it. His proximity sent a strange warmth through me, my skin prickling with awareness. Your grandmother's work? He asked. I nodded, surprised again. How did you know? The carving style is familiar. Something passed over his face too quickly for me to interpret. She had skill. She was the pack healer before. I trailed off, the pain still fresh even after 5 years. Grandmother had been the only one who never looked at me with disappointment, who told me stories of wolves who found their strength in unexpected ways. After her death, I'd truly become alone. Before she died, he finished for me, and now you serve, rather than heal." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. I was never trained in her arts. After the claiming ceremony, such an honor wouldn't be appropriate for a broken Omega, he finished, a hint of disdain coloring his tone, though I sensed it wasn't directed at me. The feast was reaching its conclusion. Around us, pack members were becoming louder with wine, some already departing in pairs or groups. I knew I should have been helping to clear tables, carrying platters back to the kitchen. Matron Helena had been watching me all evening, her disapproval evident. "I should return to my duties, Your Majesty," I said, preparing to rise. His hand shot out, not touching me, but hovering just above my wrist. "You will stay until I dismiss you." The command in his voice froze me in place. It wasn't the harsh order I was accustomed to from our pack leaders, but something deeper, an authority that resonated in my very bones. "Forgive me," I murmured, settling back into my seat. He studied me for a long moment. "You've been taught to apologize for existing," he observed. "That ends tonight." Before I could respond, he rose suddenly to his feet. The hall fell silent immediately, all eyes turning to the Alpha King. "I thank you for your hospitality, Alpha Marcus," he said, his voice carrying effortlessly through the space. "But the journey was long, and I wish to retire." Marcus stood quickly. "Of course, Your Majesty. We've prepared our finest quarters for you and your guards." "Good." King Alaric's gaze swept the room before landing on me. "Eleanor will show me the way." I heard several gasps. Serving at the feast was one thing. Being selected to escort the Alpha King to his quarters was something else entirely. Such an honor would normally go to a high-ranking beta female, or perhaps even one of Alpha Marcus's daughters. Marcus's face flushed red. "Your Majesty, perhaps one of our—" "I've made my choice," King Alaric cut him off, his tone brooking no argument. He extended his hand toward me. "Come, Eleanor." On trembling legs, I stood and moved around the table. I could feel the collective shock of the pack, could practically hear the questions forming in their minds. Why me? What had I done to deserve such attention? I didn't take his hand. I wouldn't dare presume such familiarity. But I bowed my head respectfully. "This way, Your Majesty." As we moved through the hall, the crowd parted like water. I kept my eyes forward, ignoring the whispers that followed in our wake. Behind us, I could hear the heavy footsteps of the king's personal guards falling into formation. We left the great hall and entered the cool stone corridor that led to the eastern wing, where the finest guest chambers were located. Torches cast dancing shadows on the walls, and our footsteps echoed in the silence. "They fear me," King Alaric observed casually as we walked. "You're the Alpha King," I replied, stating what seemed obvious, the most powerful wolf in the territories. "And yet it is not me they are whispering about now." He glanced at me, that almost smile playing at the corner of his mouth again. "It's you." Heat crept up my neck. "I don't understand why you've shown me such attention, Your Majesty. Don't you?" We had reached the ornate wooden doors that marked the entrance to the guest quarters. The king's guards positioned themselves on either side but made no move to follow us in. He pushed open the doors, revealing a spacious chamber illuminated by a roaring fire in the hearth. Rich tapestries adorned the walls, and the massive bed was piled high with furs. It was a room I had helped prepare but never expected to enter again. King Alaric stepped inside, then turned to face me. I remained at the threshold, uncertain. "Come in and close the door," he said. Every instinct warned me of the impropriety, of the gossip that would surely follow. An unmarried Omega alone with the Alpha King in his chambers. It was the stuff of scandal, but I found myself obeying, stepping inside and pushing the heavy door closed behind me. In the more intimate space, his presence seemed even more overwhelming. He moved to a table where a decanter of amber liquid had been placed, pouring 2 glasses. "Your pack," he said, offering me one of the glasses, "has forgotten much of the old ways." I accepted the glass but didn't drink. "The old ways, Your Majesty? Before the Great War, before wolves began to organize into territorial packs with rigid hierarchies, we understood that strength takes many forms." He took a sip from his glass, watching me over the rim. "Your grandmother knew this." You knew my grandmother? The question burst from me before I could stop it. I knew of her, he corrected. Isadora was respected even beyond your pack's borders. A healer of rare talent. Hearing my grandmother's name on his lips sent a shiver through me. Few in the pack even spoke of her anymore. It was as though her connection to me had tainted her memory. She believed I would shift one day, I said quietly. She was wrong. Was she? King Alaric set down his glass and approached me slowly, like one might approach a wild animal they didn't wish to startle. Tell me something, Eleanor. When was the last time you entered the forest alone? When was the last time you felt the earth beneath your feet without fear or shame shadowing your steps? The question struck something deep within me. I couldn't remember. After the failed claiming ceremony, I had avoided the forest, the place where wolves felt most connected to their true nature. It hurt too much to be there, reminded me too much of what I couldn't have. It's been years, I admitted. Tomorrow, he said, you will join the hunt. My eyes widened. That's impossible. I'm not allowed to. You will join the hunt, he repeated, his voice resonating with that same authority that seemed to bypass my thoughts and speak directly to something primal within me. Not as a servant, as my guest. Alpha Marcus will never permit it, I protested. King Alaric's expression hardened slightly. Alpha Marcus rules this pack at my pleasure, Eleanor. He would do well to remember that, as would you. The reminder of his true power sent another shiver through me. I had been so caught up in the mystery of his interest that I'd almost forgotten who he truly was. Not just an alpha, but the alpha, whose authority superseded all others. Why are you doing this? I whispered. Why me? He reached out slowly, and this time he did touch me, one finger lightly tracing the wooden pendant that still hung exposed over my dress. The brief contact sent a jolt of heat through my body. Because, he said softly, sometimes what looks like a curse is actually a gift the world isn't ready for. His winter blue eyes held mine. Get some rest, Eleanor. Tomorrow will change everything. With those cryptic words hanging in the air between us, he stepped back, clearly dismissing me. I set down the untouched glass and moved toward the door, my mind whirling with questions. As my hand touched the handle, his voice stopped me. And Eleanor? Wear something suitable for riding. I'll send someone with appropriate attire at dawn. I nodded wordlessly and slipped out the door, past the impassive guards and into the corridor beyond. Only when I was alone did I realize I was trembling, not with fear, but with a strange, wild hope I hadn't felt in years. Tomorrow would change everything, he'd said. As I made my way back to my small room in the servants' quarters, the wooden wolf warm against my skin, I wondered exactly what kind of change the Alpha King had in mind. Sleep evaded me that night. I lay on my narrow bed in the servants' quarters, staring at the ceiling as moonlight filtered through the small window. The events of the evening played over and over in my mind. The Alpha King's piercing gaze, his cryptic words, the way he'd singled me out before the entire pack. By the time the first hint of dawn lightened the sky, I had given up on rest entirely. I sat up, pulling my grandmother's pendant from beneath my nightdress and studying it in the pale light. The tiny wooden wolf seemed to stare back at me, its carved eyes holding secrets I couldn't decipher. What did you know? I whispered to it, thinking of grandmother Isadora. Had she seen something in me that others hadn't? That I myself couldn't see? A soft knock at my door startled me from my thoughts. I quickly tucked the pendant away and pulled a shawl around my shoulders before opening the door a crack. A young woman I didn't recognize stood in the corridor, her arms laden with fabric. She wore the emblem of the Northern Territories on her tunic, one of King Alaric's people. By order of His Majesty, she said, holding out the bundle. You're to wear this for the hunt. I accepted the clothing with murmured thanks, closing the door as she departed without another word. My hands trembled slightly as I laid the garments on my bed. The riding outfit was finer than anything I'd ever worn. Soft leather breeches in deep brown, a cream-colored linen shirt, and a fitted forest green jacket with subtle silver embroidery at the cuffs and collar. There were also soft leather boots and a belt of braided leather. All of it looked new, made with expert craftsmanship. I ran my fingers over the materials, wondering how the king had procured such items overnight. Had he brought them with him, The thought that he might have planned this encounter sent a shiver down my spine. As I dressed, I couldn't help but notice how well everything fit, as though made specifically for me. The jacket hugged my waist in a way my shapeless serving dresses never did, and the breeches allowed freedom of movement I wasn't accustomed to. When I'd finished braiding my pale hair and securing it at the nape of my neck, I hardly recognized the person staring back from the small mirror on my wall. I looked different. Not like a servant, not quite like a proper pack member either, but something else entirely. I slipped my grandmother's pendant beneath the shirt, its familiar weight against my skin providing some comfort. Then, taking a deep breath, I stepped out into the corridor and made my way toward the main courtyard, where I knew the hunting party would gather. The sun had just crested the horizon when I emerged into the crisp morning air. The courtyard was already alive with activity. Stable hands leading out horses, pack members checking weapons and supplies. I hesitated in the shadow of the doorway, suddenly overwhelmed by uncertainty. There you are. I turned to find King Alaric approaching, his imposing figure somehow even more striking in daylight. He wore riding clothes similar to mine but in darker colors, with a silver clasp at his throat bearing his pack's emblem. His dark hair was pulled back from his face, emphasizing the sharp angles of his jaw and cheekbones. "Your Majesty?" I greeted him with a small bow of my head. His eyes traveled over my attire, a hint of approval warming his usually impassive expression. "Better," he said simply. "Follow me." He led me across the courtyard toward where the horses were being prepared. I could feel eyes following us, confused, curious, some openly hostile. Alpha Marcus stood with his beta council, their conversation faltering as they spotted me at the king's side. "Your Majesty," Marcus called, stepping forward with a forced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We're honored to have you join our hunt today." His gaze slid to me, hardening with barely concealed anger. "Though I must express concern about your choice of companion. The failed Omega has no training for the hunt. She could be a liability." I lowered my gaze, shame washing through me despite my resolve to stand tall, but before I could retreat into my habitual submissiveness, King Alaric spoke. "She rides with me," he said, his tone casual yet brooking no argument. "I take full responsibility for her safety." "But Your Majesty," Marcus began. "Is there a problem, Alpha Marcus?" King Alaric's voice remained perfectly level, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Marcus paled slightly. "No, Your Majesty, of course not." "Good." The king turned to me. "Have you ridden before, Eleanor?" "Yes, Your Majesty," I answered truthfully. Before my failed claiming ceremony, I'd ridden often with my grandmother, collecting herbs in the forest. After her death and my disgrace, such privileges had been denied me. He nodded and gestured to a sleek chestnut mare being led toward us. "This is Ember. She has a gentle temperament but doesn't suffer fools. You'll suit each other, I think." The mare regarded me with intelligent eyes as I approached cautiously. I held out my hand, allowing her to catch my scent. After a moment, she nudged my palm with her velvet nose, a gesture that felt like acceptance. With more confidence than I felt, I mounted the horse, settling into the saddle as memories of riding flooded back. King Alaric swung easily onto his own mount, a massive black stallion that towered over the other horses. Alpha Marcus gave the signal, and the hunting party moved out. I found myself riding near the front, alongside King Alaric, while Marcus and his betas followed close behind. I could feel their disapproving stares boring into my back. "Ignore them," King Alaric said quietly. "Their opinions are irrelevant." Easy for him to say. He wouldn't have to live with the consequences of this day after he departed. Yet, as we passed through the village and entered the forest beyond, a strange sense of freedom began to unfurl within me. The familiar weight of others' disappointment seemed to lighten with each step my horse took into the wild. The forest welcomed us with dappled sunlight and the rich scent of pine and earth. Birds called from the canopy above, and somewhere in the distance, a stream burbled over rocks. I felt a knot in my chest begin to loosen, a tightness I hadn't even realized was there until it began to release. "You're smiling," King Alaric observed, guiding his stallion alongside my mare. I hadn't noticed. "It's been a long time since I've been in the forest," I admitted. And yet this is where you belong. It wasn't a question, but a statement, delivered with such certainty that I couldn't help but wonder at its meaning. The hunting party spread out as we ventured deeper into the woods. Occasionally, one of the betas would report signs of deer or wild boar, changing our direction. I was content to follow, absorbing the sensations of the forest around me, the cool air against my face, the rhythmic movement of the horse beneath me, the symphony of woodland sounds. After perhaps an hour, King Alaric suddenly raised his hand, bringing our small group to a halt. Without a word, he dismounted and gestured for me to do the same. When Alpha Marcus moved to follow, the king stopped him with a look. "Continue the hunt," he commanded. "Eleanor and I have business elsewhere. We will rejoin you by midday." Marcus's face darkened with suspicion. "These woods can be dangerous, Your Majesty. Allow me to send some betas with you for protection." That won't be necessary." King Alaric's tone left no room for argument. "I'm quite capable of defending myself and one Omega." The dismissal was clear. With obvious reluctance, Marcus signaled for the hunting party to move on, leaving King Alaric and me alone with our horses in a small clearing. Once they were out of sight, the king turned to me. "Tie your horse. We go on foot from here." Curious and slightly apprehensive, I secured Ember's reins to a low branch, as he did the same with his stallion. Then, without explanation, he began walking deeper into the forest, clearly expecting me to follow. We moved in silence through increasingly dense undergrowth. I had no idea what business could possibly bring the Alpha King to this remote section of our territory, but I didn't dare ask. The forest grew older here, the trees massive and gnarled, their branches creating a cathedral-like canopy above us. Few pack members ventured this far into the woods. It was said to be the domain of the ancients, spirits from before the Great War. Just as I was about to break the silence to ask how much farther we would go, King Alaric stopped. Before us lay a small, perfectly circular clearing where the morning sunlight streamed down unimpeded. In the center stood a massive oak tree, its trunk wider than 3 men standing shoulder to shoulder, its branches reaching like arms toward the sky. "Do you know this place?" he asked, his voice unusually soft. I shook my head. "I've never been this deep in the forest." "This is the Heart Tree," he said. "Once each territory had one, a place where wolves would come to connect with their true nature, away from pack politics and hierarchies. Most have been forgotten or deliberately hidden." He gave me a pointed look. "Your grandmother would have known it." The mention of grandmother Isadora sent a pang through my chest. Had she brought me here as a child? I had a vague memory of a massive tree and dappled sunlight, but it was hazy, dreamlike. "Why have you brought me here?" I asked. Instead of answering, King Alaric approached the great oak, placing his palm against its rough bark. "The rituals your pack performs, the claiming ceremony with its herbs and chanting and spectators, those are new inventions, barely a century old. The true way, the old way, was simpler." He turned back to me, his winter blue eyes intent. A wolf alone in the wild, connecting with their deepest self beneath the witness of ancient trees and sky. No pressure, no judgment, no fear of failure. Understanding dawned slowly. "You think if I try to shift here?" "I think," he said carefully, "that your wolf has been suffocated by expectation and shame. Here, there is only truth." He stepped away from the tree, gesturing toward it. "Go. Touch the heart tree. Close your eyes. Breathe." Everything in me wanted to refuse, to protect myself from another failure, another disappointment. Yet something deeper pulled me forward. Perhaps the same something that had stirred when King Alaric first spoke my name in the great hall. My feet carried me to the ancient oak. I placed my trembling palm against its bark, feeling the rough texture against my skin. Warmth seemed to radiate from within the living wood, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. "Close your eyes," King Alaric instructed, his deep voice seeming to come from both everywhere and nowhere. "Forget everything they told you about what you are. Forget their ceremonies and their rules. Feel the earth beneath your feet. Feel the air in your lungs." I obeyed, letting my eyelids flutter closed. The forest sounds intensified. Birds calling, leaves rustling, the distant stream flowing over stones. I could smell the rich earth, the green growing things, the hint of wildflowers nearby. Now, he continued, his voice lower, almost a growl, reach inside yourself, not with fear or desperation, but with acceptance. Your wolf is not separate from you, Eleanor. She is you. The wildest, truest part of your soul. Something stirred within me, a warmth spreading from my center outward, like liquid fire flowing through my veins. My breath quickened. She has always been there, King Alaric said, closer now, his voice a caress against my consciousness. Waiting, protected. Your grandmother's pendant wasn't just a token of affection, it was a shield, keeping your power hidden until you were ready. My free hand went instinctively to where the wooden wolf rested against my skin. Hidden? Protected? From what? Why would she hide my wolf? I whispered. My eyes still closed, my palm still pressed to the ancient tree. Because, King Alaric said, his breath warm against my ear, you are not what they think you are, Eleanor. You are not a broken omega. You are something much rarer, much more powerful, and much more dangerous to those who would control you. The warmth within me flared suddenly, and I gasped as something seemed to unfurl in my chest, like a flower blooming, like wings spreading, like a howl building in my throat. That's it, he encouraged. Feel her. Accept her. She's been patient, waiting for you to find your strength. My skin tingled, my senses sharpening until I could hear a rabbit's heartbeat yards away. Could smell the particular sweetness of sap flowing within the heart tree. Open your eyes, Eleanor, King Alaric commanded softly, but don't move your hand from the tree. Slowly, I opened my eyes and nearly cried out in shock, where my hand pressed against the tree. A soft golden light pulsed beneath my palm, spreading like veins through the bark, illuminating the ancient oak from within. What? I gasped, nearly pulling away in shock, but King Alaric's hand covered mine, keeping it pressed against the tree. Don't break the connection, he said urgently. This is what I suspected. This is why I came. The golden light continued to spread through the massive oak, following the natural patterns in the bark like luminous rivers. I could feel something flowing between me and the ancient tree. Energy, life force. Something without a name that resonated in the deepest part of my being. I don't understand, I whispered, transfixed by the light emanating from beneath my palm. What is happening to me? King Alaric's expression was intense, his winter blue eyes reflecting the golden glow. You're a lumina, Eleanor, the first I've seen in over a century. A lumina. The word was unfamiliar, yet it sent a shiver of recognition through me. In the old days, before the Great War, there were wolves who could connect directly with the life force of the world, the trees, the earth, the very fabric of nature itself. His voice had taken on a reverent quality I hadn't heard before. They weren't classified by arbitrary hierarchies like Alpha or Omega. They were simply lumina, light-bringers, healers, peacekeepers. I stared at my glowing hand in disbelief. But I can't shift. I've never been able to... Because your power doesn't manifest that way, he interrupted. Illumina's wolf is spirit, not flesh. You won't shift like others do. Your transformation is internal, a heightening of senses, an awakening of abilities that have nothing to do with physical form. The golden light began to recede, pulling back into the tree until only a faint glow remained beneath my palm. As it faded, I became aware of an altered state in myself. My vision sharper, sounds clearer, scents more distinct. The forest around me felt more alive, more connected to me than I could have imagined possible. Your grandmother knew, King Alaric said, releasing my hand as the last of the light disappeared. That's why she carved the pendant, a focus point to help control your abilities until you were ready, and a shield to hide your true nature from those who might exploit it. I stepped back from the tree, suddenly overwhelmed. My legs trembled, and I sank to the forest floor, my back against the massive oak. Why didn't she tell me? King Alaric crouched before me, his powerful frame balanced perfectly. Would you have believed her, or would you have exposed yourself, trying to prove something to a pack that wouldn't understand what you are? He was right. Even as a child, I'd longed for acceptance, had tried desperately to fit into the rigid structure of our pack. If grandmother had told me I possessed some rare, ancient power, I would have tried to demonstrate it, to win the approval I so desperately craved. After the Great War, King Alaric continued, wolves organized into territorial packs with strict hierarchies, alphas to lead, betas to enforce, omegas to nurture. It brought stability in a time of chaos, but something was lost. His eyes held mine. The Lumina were forgotten, their abilities dismissed as myths. Those born with the gift either never awakened it or were persecuted if they did. Persecuted? I asked, a chill running through me. Power that cannot be controlled threatens those who crave control, he said simply. A Lumina cannot be commanded by an Alpha's order. Their loyalty comes from respect, not hierarchy. That makes them dangerous to leaders who rule through fear and domination. I thought of Alpha Marcus, of the rigid structure of our pack, the way status determined everything from where you slept, to what you ate, to whether your opinions were valued. A wolf who couldn't be controlled would indeed be seen as a threat. Is that why you came here? I asked. To find a Lumina? Something flickered in King Alaric's eyes. A vulnerability I hadn't seen before. I came because I sensed something stirring in this territory, something I'd encountered only in ancient texts and my grandfather's stories. He paused. I didn't expect to find you, Eleanor. But when I saw you at the feast, with your grandmother's pendant and your hidden power simmering beneath the surface, I knew. What happens now? My voice was barely above a whisper. That depends on you. He stood, extending his hand to help me up. You could continue as you have been, serving at feasts, invisible, your true nature suppressed. Or you could embrace what you are, learn to control your abilities, find your purpose. I placed my hand in his, allowing him to pull me to my feet. His skin was warm against mine, and that now familiar spark of energy passed between us. How would I even begin? I know nothing about being a Lumina. I can teach you, he said. Or rather, I can connect you with those who can. In my territories, the old ways haven't been entirely forgotten. There are still a few elders who remember the Lumina, who preserve the knowledge of what you are. You would take me to the Northern Territories? The idea was both terrifying and exhilarating, to leave the only home I'd ever known, to journey to a strange land with this powerful, enigmatic king, if you choose to come. His expression was serious. I won't force you, Eleanor. This must be your decision. A twig snapped somewhere beyond the clearing, and King Alaric tensed, his posture shifting instantly from conversational to alert. He moved in front of me, his senses clearly scanning the forest around us. We're not alone, he said quietly. Someone followed us. Fear shot through me. If someone from the pack had witnessed what had just happened, had heard our conversation, show yourself, King Alaric commanded, his alpha voice resonating with power. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, a figure emerged from the trees, Beta Darius, his face twisted with a mixture of shock and triumph. I knew there was something unnatural about you, he spat, his eyes fixed on me. Wait until Alpha Marcus hears what his honored guest has been doing, consorting with a freak, a witch. King Alaric's posture shifted subtly, becoming more predatory. You followed your Alpha King against his explicit orders, he said, his voice dangerously soft. That alone would justify punishment. Darius faltered slightly, but his hatred toward me seemed to override his fear. The pack has a right to know what she is, what you're planning. And what exactly do you think that is? King Alaric asked, taking a step toward Darius, who instinctively backed up. You're trying to undermine our pack, Darius said, though with less conviction, using her abnormality, somehow. I felt a surge of something unfamiliar, not fear or shame, but indignation. All my life I'd been called broken, deficient, abnormal. But now, understanding what I truly was, those words lost their power to wound. My name is Eleanor, I said, stepping out from behind King Alaric, straightening my spine. And I am not abnormal, I am Lumina. The word felt right on my tongue, powerful and true. The energy I'd felt while touching the heart tree still hummed beneath my skin, making me feel more alive than I had in years. Darius sneered, Whatever you call it, you're still a freak. And once Marcus knows, you won't be telling Alpha Marcus anything. King Alaric interrupted, his voice like ice. Because you're going to swear an oath of silence, here and now, before the heart tree. Something like fear flickered across Darius's face. Even in our pack, where the old ways had largely been forgotten, oaths sworn before ancient trees were still considered binding and sacred. To break such an oath was to invite the worst kind of misfortune. And if I refuse? Darius challenged, though his voice trembled slightly. King Alaric smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. Then I will invoke my right as Alpha King to punish disloyalty as I see fit. Would you like to hear what form that punishment might take? Darius paled. You can't. I can. King Alaric cut him off. And I will. So choose, Beta. An oath of silence, or my judgment. For a tense moment, I thought Darius might still refuse, but self-preservation won out, and he lowered his eyes in submission. I'll take the oath, he muttered. Approach the heart tree, King Alaric commanded. With obvious reluctance, Darius moved toward the massive oak. King Alaric positioned him with his palm against the bark, just as mine had been. Repeat after me, the king said. I, Beta Darius of the Eastern Pack, swear by the ancient power of the heart tree to keep secret what I have witnessed this day. Darius repeated the words, his face twisted with resentment. I will not speak of it, write of it, or communicate it in any way to any living soul, on pain of the tree's judgment. Again, Darius echoed the words. Should I break this oath, may my wolf abandon me, my strength desert me, and my place in the pack be forfeit. Darius hesitated at the severity of the consequence, but after a threatening look from King Alaric, he repeated this final part as well. As the last word left his lips, something strange happened. The tree seemed to pulse once, a nearly imperceptible wave of energy spreading outward. I felt it wash over me, saw Darius flinch as it passed through him. It is done, King Alaric said with satisfaction. The heart tree has witnessed and bound your oath. Darius jerked his hand away from the tree as if burned. Are you satisfied, Your Majesty? He asked bitterly. Not yet. King Alaric's gaze was piercing. You will return to the hunting party and say nothing of following us. If asked, you will say you lost your way and are rejoining the group. Is that clear? Yes, Your Majesty, Darius ground out. Go then. With one last hate-filled glance at me, Darius turned and disappeared back into the forest. I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. He'll still be a problem, I said quietly. Oath or not. Perhaps, King Alaric acknowledged, but you have time now. Time to decide your path. The sun had risen higher in the sky, filtering through the canopy in golden shafts. It would be midday soon. We were expected to rejoin the hunting party. We should go, I said, though I was reluctant to leave this magical clearing, this place where I had finally begun to understand myself. King Alaric nodded, but before turning to leave, he placed his own palm against the heart tree. He closed his eyes briefly, and though no golden light appeared, I sensed a communication of sorts, a silent acknowledgement between the Alpha King and the ancient oak. Thank you, he said simply, and I wasn't sure if he was speaking to the tree or to some power beyond it. We walked back to our horses in companionable silence. My mind was a whirl with all I had learned, all that had changed in the space of a morning. I was not broken. I was Lumina, rare, different, but whole. As I untied Ember's reins, a thought struck me. You said I was the first Lumina you'd seen in over a century, I said, turning to King Alaric. But how is that possible? You can't be that old. Something like amusement flickered in his eyes. The alpha bloodline of the Northern Territories is unique, he said cryptically. We age differently than most wolves. Before I could press for more details, he swung onto his stallion's back. We should hurry if we're to meet the hunting party by midday. I mounted Ember, settling into the saddle with newfound confidence. As we rode through the forest, I found myself more attuned to the world around me. The birds calling to each other, the deer moving silently through the underbrush, the very pulse of life in the trees and earth. Is it always like this? I asked. This awareness? It will grow stronger as you learn to control it, King Alaric replied. A fully trained Lumina can sense disturbances in nature miles away, can heal with a touch, can communicate with animals and plants in ways other wolves cannot imagine. The possibilities were dizzying. All my life, I'd been told I was less than others, and now I was discovering I might be more, in ways I was only beginning to understand. We rode on, the forest gradually thinning as we approached the area where the hunting party had planned to break for the midday meal. The sounds of voices and horses reached us before we saw them. The hunting party gathered in a small meadow, some seated on fallen logs eating bread and cheese, others standing in small groups conversing. Alpha Marcus spotted us immediately, his expression darkening as he took in our arrival together. I braced myself, knowing that despite all I had learned, in the eyes of my pack, I was still the failed Omega who had inexplicably caught the attention of the Alpha King. Your Majesty, Marcus called, approaching as we dismounted. We were beginning to worry. Did your business go well? The emphasis he placed on business made his suspicion clear. His gaze flicked to me, cold and assessing. Very well, King Alaric replied smoothly. Eleanor has been most helpful in showing me the unique features of your territory. I kept my expression neutral, though inside a new confidence was blooming. I caught Darius watching us from the edge of the gathering, his face tight with the secret he was now bound to keep. I'm pleased to hear it, Marcus said, not sounding pleased at all. We've had a successful hunt, 2 large bucks that will make a fine feast tonight. Excellent, King Alaric responded. I look forward to it. As the conversation turned to hunting routes and techniques, I moved away to tend to Ember, giving the mare water from a nearby stream. As I crouched by the water's edge, I caught sight of my reflection. The same pale blonde hair, the same face I'd always known, but somehow transformed. There was a light in my eyes that hadn't been there before, a certainty in my posture, Lumina. The word echoed in my mind, filling spaces that had always felt empty. Whatever came next, whatever path I chose, I would never again believe I was broken. The return to the Packlands was marked by an undercurrent of tension I could now perceive with my heightened senses. The hunting party's confusion about my place beside King Alaric had transformed into a mix of suspicion, jealousy, and in some cases outright hostility. I could smell their emotions, a new ability that both fascinated and overwhelmed me. Ember carried me gracefully, her steady gait a comfort, as I processed all that had happened at the Heart Tree. Occasionally, King Alaric would glance my way, his expression unreadable to others perhaps, but I could now see the subtle concern, the silent question. What will you choose? By the time we reached the village, word of my strange elevation had spread. Villagers paused in their tasks to watch our procession, their eyes widening at the sight of me in fine riding clothes beside the Alpha King. I spotted Lily among them, her face a mixture of confusion and wonder. I offered her a small smile, which she hesitantly returned before ducking back into the bakery. Your pack fears what they don't understand, King Alaric observed quietly as we dismounted in the main courtyard. It was the same across all territories after the Great War, fear leading to rigid structures, to the suppression of any gift that didn't fit neatly into their new hierarchies. I handed Ember's reins to a wide-eyed stable boy. How did it happen? I asked. How did the Lumina become forgotten? Deliberately, he said, his voice low enough that only I could hear. The new Alphas who emerged after the war saw the Lumina as threats to their authority. Stories were spread that Lumina powers were dangerous, uncontrollable. Those who showed signs of the gift were ostracized or worse. His expression darkened. In some territories they were hunted. A chill ran through me. And in yours? Something like pride crossed his face. My great-grandfather refused to bow to fear. He protected those with the old gifts, creating sanctuaries deep in our mountains where the ancient ways could be preserved. He paused. It cost him allies, but he believed some things were worth protecting, even at great price. Before I could respond, Alpha Marcus approached, his smile not reaching his eyes. Your Majesty, we've prepared a feast to celebrate today's successful hunt. Will you honor us with your presence tonight? Of course, King Alaric replied smoothly. I look forward to it. Marcus's gaze slid to me, his disapproval barely concealed. Eleanor, you should return to your quarters and resume your normal duties. Matron Helena has been quite distressed by your absence. It was a dismissal, one I would have accepted without question just yesterday, but something had changed within me. I straightened my spine, meeting his gaze. Actually, King Alaric interjected before I could speak. Eleanor will be joining us at the high table again tonight. She has proven herself invaluable during our explorations today. Marcus's jaw tightened. As you wish, Your Majesty, he said stiffly before turning away. He won't allow this disruption to continue much longer, I observed as Marcus departed. Once you leave. Which brings us back to the question, King Alaric said, his winter blue eyes intent. What will you choose, Eleanor, this pack that has denied your true nature, or a journey to discover what you truly are? The question hung between us, weighty with possibility and risk. Before I could answer, a commotion near the main gate caught our attention. A rider was entering at speed, his cloak bearing the emblem of the Northern Territories. The messenger dismounted swiftly, bowing deeply before King Alaric. Your Majesty, urgent news from home, he said, extending a sealed parchment. King Alaric's expression betrayed nothing as he broke the seal and read the message, but I could sense a shift in him, a sharpening of focus, a sudden tension. I must return to the Northern Territories immediately, he announced, folding the parchment. There has been an incident at the western border. Alpha Marcus, who had hurried over at the messenger's arrival, looked caught between disappointment at losing his important guest and relief that the disruption to his pack would soon end. We are sorry to lose your company so soon, Your Majesty. Shall we prepare for your departure after the feast? No, King Alaric replied. We leave at dawn. His gaze found mine. There is no more time for indecision, Eleanor. You must choose tonight. The hours that followed passed in a blur. I was given leave to prepare for the feast rather than help serve it, a concession that drew venomous looks from Matron Helena. In my small room, I stared at my reflection as I dressed in a gown that had been delivered, a simple but elegant creation of deep blue silk that brought out the color of my eyes. The wooden wolf pendant lay against my skin, no longer just a remembrance of my grandmother, but a symbol of a heritage I was only beginning to understand. I touched it gently, wondering what she would advise if she were here now. Remember who you are beneath what they see. Her words came back to me clearer than ever. Had she always been preparing me for this moment? For this choice? The feast was even grander than the previous nights. The great hall transformed by additional tapestries and garlands of autumn leaves. As before, I sat beside King Alaric at the high table, feeling the weight of curious and hostile stares. But now, understanding what I was, the judgment of the pack seemed less crushing, less defining. Throughout the meal, I caught glimpses of Darius watching me with barely contained hatred, the oath he'd sworn clearly chafing at him. Alpha Marcus alternated between forced joviality with King Alaric and cold glances in my direction. The air was thick with tension that even those without my enhanced senses could feel. As the meal progressed, I leaned slightly toward King Alaric. What was in the message? I asked quietly. Is something wrong in your territories? His expression remained neutral, but his voice was tight when he answered. Border skirmishes with rogue hunters. Nothing we haven't faced before, but timing is significant. The rogues who caused the Great War? Their descendants, he confirmed. They've been growing bolder in recent months, testing boundaries, seeking weaknesses. I sensed there was more he wasn't saying, but before I could press further, Alpha Marcus rose to offer a toast to our distinguished guest, praising the alliance between our packs and wishing the king a safe journey home. And perhaps, Marcus added with a meaningful look at King Alaric, you might find reason to visit us again soon, though under more traditional circumstances. His gaze slid to his eldest daughter, Sarah, seated further down the table. Her beauty was renowned in our pack, her status as a prime alpha female, making her a desirable political match. She lowered her eyes demurely at the implication, though I caught the flash of ambition in them before she did. King Alaric lifted his goblet in acknowledgement but made no commitments. The feast continued, music and wine flowing freely as the night deepened. Through it all, I felt the weight of the decision before me, the vastness of the unknown against the familiarity of my life here, limited though it was. As the celebration began to wind down, King Alaric leaned close. "Walk with me in the courtyard," he said softly. "There are things you should know before you decide." I followed him outside, where the night air was cool and crisp, the moon nearly full above us. We stopped near the ancient well at the center of the courtyard, far enough from the hall that our conversation would remain private. "The message wasn't only about border skirmishes, was it?" I asked, sensing his unease. "No." His face was grave in the moonlight. "The rogues are hunting Lumina." Fear trickled down my spine. "Why?" "There's an old prophecy," he said, his voice low, "that when the Lumina return in numbers, the old ways will rise again, and those who rule through fear will fall." His eyes met mine. For centuries, the gift has been rare, appearing only in isolated individuals who could be easily suppressed or eliminated. But lately, there have been more born with the potential. "Like me," I whispered. "Yes." He paused. "The rogues serve those who would maintain the current order at any cost. They've begun actively hunting those with the gift, particularly those who haven't yet learned to control their abilities." "Is that why my grandmother hid what I was?" I asked, "to protect me from these hunters?" "Isadora was wiser than most," he said with respect in his voice. "She must have sensed what was coming. The pendant she gave you doesn't just focus your power. It dampens it, makes it harder to detect." I touched the wooden wolf through my gown. "But at the heart tree, you fully connected with your gift for the first time. Now that it's awakened, the pendant won't hide you as effectively." His expression was serious. "You're safer within my territories, where others of your kind are protected, where you can learn to control and defend your gift." The gravity of the situation settled over me. This wasn't just about finding my place or understanding my abilities. It was potentially about survival. "If I stay here," I began. "Your pack might protect you out of duty," he acknowledged. "But they don't understand what you are or the threat you face. And some, like Darius, fear what they don't understand." I thought of the hatred in Darius's eyes, of the confusion and suspicion that had followed me all day, even if Alpha Marcus offered protection. How long would it last once King Alaric departed? "I need to know," I said finally, meeting his gaze directly. "Why did you really come here? Was it just to find Illumina?" Something shifted in his expression. A vulnerability I hadn't seen before. "I came seeking an alliance," as I said. "But yes, I also came following rumors of old power stirring in these lands." He paused. "What I didn't expect was to find you, Eleanor. To find someone whose light calls to something in me I thought long buried. The admission hung between us, charged with meaning I wasn't sure I fully understood. But I felt it. A connection beyond words, beyond the strangeness of our respective positions." "I've made my decision," I said, my voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. "I will go with you to the Northern Territories." Relief flickered across his face, quickly masked. "You understand there can be no return to what was before? Once you embrace your true nature, there is no going back to invisibility." I looked toward the Great Hall, where my pack celebrated without me, where I had spent years in the shadows, believing myself broken. "I don't want to go back," I said with newfound certainty. "I want to go forward." In the silver moonlight, with the scent of pine and possibility on the night air, I felt my grandmother's pendant warm against my skin, not a shield anymore, but a beacon guiding me toward who I was meant to be. Dawn would bring a new journey, new dangers, new discoveries. But for the first time in my life, I would face them as my true self. Not a failed Omega, but Lumina, Lightbringer, keeper of the old ways. And I was